Hey everybody, Aaron Cowan, Sage Dynamics, and this is a Steiner Optics MPS. As with all new optics, as soon as this thing was announced and released, which almost seemed like it happened in the same week, I didn't even know this was in development. I don't have a personal relationship with every optic company, although I do enjoy many Steiner products. So when the MPS initially came out, it was really hard to get a feel for it. Or I should say when it was first announced, it was really hard to get a feel for it because some of the photos and some of the videos didn't really give it proportional size or really cover, to me, in depth the features that the optic was going to include. So as soon as I found one in stock, I actually grabbed this one from Euro Optic. I went ahead and bought it, came in and mounted it on an FN 509 MRD and immediately hit the range to start the 2,000 round review process. There has been already some confusion about this optic because it is so new and not everybody has one or not everybody knows someone who does have one. It is an acro footprint, however it ships with an adapter plate for a doctor footprint, which is a little strange but very European. So keeping on with that, if you have an acro, like I'm using the 509's acro plate in order to mount this for the review process, that's our default footprint. It is a 3.3 MOA dot, which is a little strange, but also in a really good sweet spot for size with 1 MOA adjustments and a top load 1632 battery, giving us 13,000 hours of ideal battery life. It is in a default mode of auto off after 13 hours with no shake awake feature. Whoever was in charge of that was probably out sick that day. I don't know. It seems very strange to have an auto off but not an auto on or a motion on feature, so the optic just turns itself off. However, you can program that out, and I already have. Body design, of course, it is an enclosed emitter, which is the way all optics are going as optics start to eclipse iron sights as the primary method of aiming for pistols. We're starting to see more thoughtful design go into the optics that we're seeing from pretty much every company. It is a little surprising. I wouldn't say surprising. It was, I guess, to be expected that Steiner was eventually going to release a serious pistol optic, and that's at least initially what I think they may have done. So for the first 500 rounds of the 2,000 round review, got it zeroed and then immediately put it to work. Throughout the review process, I used 2 different holsters. For concealed carry, I used a Filster Floodlight. For duty carry, I used a Safari Lens 6390 RDS holster. And in case you're wondering about compatibility, it is duty holster compatible, and the optic does seem geared for duty carry. For concealed carry, do you need an enclosed optic? Not necessarily. However, if you're going to buy a new optic, if you don't already have one that's durable and is well known and it's got a good reputation and it's zeroed and you like it, there's no reason not to go enclosed. Going forward, I think everyone eventually is going to just offer enclosed optics, but until we get there, videos like this hopefully will be helpful for you. My initial feeling is the glass is very clean. The front lens is recessed to help defend the lens itself from scratches and contact with foreign surfaces. One of the things I do during my evaluation of all optics is one-handed manipulations. Something we teach for people with iron sights as well. If you have to reciprocate or manipulate the slide one-handed, we used to just teach people to catch it on the rear sight. Now we teach them to work it off the optic body. Probably the only time I'd advocate using the optic body to manipulate the gun is when you don't have another hand to help. Because it is a top-load battery, definitely some thought went into this. They have these raised sidewalls which feel like a plastic polymer material, even though the body itself is metal, which does help protect that top battery cap, because some optics in the past, when they were dropped just right or got hit just right on the battery cap on the top, it caused issues. The adjustments, windage and elevation, are recessed, and they're slot head versus like Torx or something like that. So a 9mm casing is going to do you well, and they're tactile. You feel and hear the clicks as you dial in your windage and your elevation when zeroing or making otherwise adjustments. The glass is very clean. It doesn't appear to have any distortion. It does also appear to be true 1X, and the notch filter is very subtle. It's got just a splash, just the lightest hint of a notch filter, which I do appreciate. One of the things that some optics have been plagued by, mostly I think by people who just don't understand what it is that bluish tint that some optics have. That's there for a reason, because it helps prolong your battery life by preventing certain transmissions of light coming through the lens, which allows the dot to be set at a lower setting in order for you to be able to see it in these bright daylight conditions. Never really been something that bothered me, but it does bother other people. The MPS doesn't really have a noticeable notch filter unless you're in certain lighting conditions. Multiple daylight settings that are very bright, and then of course it has 2 night vision settings, which I guess technically the lowest brightness setting on any optic is a night vision setting, if we talk about what night vision is, but it is nice to have specific night vision settings for people who might need them. During that first 500 rounds, the only thing that gave me pause, and it wasn't a problem, it was just something I thought might become a problem in the future, is the rear lens doesn't have much of a protective shroud from the body itself. So because the gun is stored like this, and we think about people making contact with things if they don't have a shroud on their holster for duty carry specifically, that does give me a little bit of pause, but I was going to see if the 2,000 round review process using it for duty carry and concealed carry, if I did actually identify any issues because of that. First 500 rounds went great. Got a really good feel for the optic. One thing that's definitely worth mentioning is the emitter refresh rate on this thing is fast, which means when transitioning from targets to targets, I don't have a flicker or a speed blur. It's just a dot. It's a segment. During recoil, I'm not tracking segmented dots. I'm getting that nice consistent laser that I'm looking for. So it seems to be the power output and the actual refresh rate of the emitter are excellent. They chose a really good emitter for that purpose. And of course, that brings us to the burn down. 500 rounds as quickly as possible to see if 500 rounds in a short period of time will identify issues that I wouldn't notice over the same round count over a much longer period of time. You know, 4 minutes versus 4 days, 4 weeks, 4 months. Here's your burn down. First to last round on the burn down, no issues whatsoever. I'll tell you, mounting on the 509, whew, for the burn down may have been the bad idea. I love my 509, but that was a whole lot of 17 round magazines. I need to get me some more 24 rounders and see if I can build an auto sear for that thing, just to get it over with. But 500 rounds, no problem. Throughout the review, I've been mostly shooting 115, but I'm also shooting 147, 124, 124 plus P. Even though the review is not specifically about the gun, that is adding reciprocation and recoil to the slide to see if that identifies any issue. Even though this is a pistol-centric optic, I can see some people asking how it handles recoil. Well, it handles one-handed manipulations and it handles recoil pretty well. The last 1,000 rounds were just using the optic for my normal, everyday practice. And when I say every day, I almost mean that. I spend quite a bit of time on the range. In fact, during this 2,000 round review process, it took me three trips to the range, including today, in order to knock out that 2,000 rounds for that initial evaluation. And for video purposes, I just do 2,000 rounds. And every now and then on certain things, I'll do an update when I hit like 10K or something like that. But optics are something I continually evaluate. And if you're curious about that, just not to take away from the review, but just kind of a segue, if you will. On the sagedynamics.org website, there is the white paper regarding MRDS for duty use. It's something you can check out, and it is periodically updated once, twice, maybe 3 times a year to give you the latest round counts on optic evaluations. So if you haven't seen me put out a video on an optic a while, even though I gave a video where it was like, hey, this is a really good optic, it's in the white paper. Not everything gets filmed. The elephant in the room, of course, is durability. I measure that with a 9 scientific drop test. Every 500 rounds, I do a shoulder height drop test onto either pavement, asphalt, or flagstone, whatever happens to be present on the range that I happen to be using. In this case, the range I've been using for the past, for the 2,000 round review process is concrete. So that's what we'll be dropping it on. First, let me show you a 5-round group fired at the zero distance of 25 yards using a 124 grain gold dot. Then we get to our drop test. 1 drop every 500 rounds. So that's our 4 drops. I'm happy to report during the 4 drops, I did not have any breakage or cracking or any damage whatsoever, as far as I can tell, flaking or otherwise, to either lens of the optics. So as far as maintaining clean, consistent, unbroken, untarnished, unsullied glass, the MPS is definitely a pass. And I think someone was really thinking about durability when they designed the body for this thing. It's very hard to build a square or a rectangle that's going to be able to handle significant impacts, but also when you start adding curvature to your lenses, which a lot of optics traditionally do, that actually increases the chances of breaking, in my experience. This optic was purpose-built to be robust, to be able to handle things. And Steiner is actually known for the most part, making very durable optics. So this isn't really a surprise to me. I've had bad luck with some Steiner optics in the past, but my general rule is they make quality optics. They make really clean glass. The lenses and the clarity and the quality of this optic being as good as it is not surprising. The durability, just looking at the body and the design and the thoughtfulness that went into the design, recess angling the front lens, little shroud hood that helps protect, the raised sidewalls, the placement of controls, the recessing of controls, everything seems to be purposely done to give us the most robust, the most durable optic possible. Now, the question is, after the final drop test, did it maintain 0? Here's a 5-round group fired after the final drop at 25 yards with a 124 grain gold dot. I'd call that 0 maintained. I'm really happy with that. I'm not surprised. I'm pleased that there is now another optic that can, at least for the first 2,000 rounds, handle the possible rigors of carry optics, duty optics. Some people ask, and this comes up quite a bit, why do I even do the drop test? That's silly. No one's going to drop their handgun from shoulder height. Yeah, they absolutely are. It's not as common as you might think, but it does happen. That's just for me to be able to have a consistent height, consistent impact, consistent velocity, whatever you want to call it, hard use, because optics do inadvertently take impact, especially when duty carried. You know, I keep using the word duty, and that's what my testing is for. So if it passes duty carry, it's going to be great for concealed carry, and realistically, if you conceal carry, you're less likely to encounter these things. But I hear back from students and students of students frequently about optics that get damaged or broken in the line of duty for LE, and surprisingly, one of the most common breakages isn't a shoulder height drop, it's the optic getting crushed while it's on the gun, while it's in a duty holster when there's like a fight or scuffle, roll around the ground, getting thrown into a wall, whatever. Quite a few optics have been broken in that way. So if it can handle a drop test, I mean, that's my goalpost. And wouldn't you rather have an optic that could versus one that couldn't? Of course, the final question is going to be, what do I think about it? I think it's a very thoughtful design. I think they put a lot of purpose design into the final product. I think that they want to be a serious contender for conceal and duty carry, and this optic definitely helps them, at least initially, my initial 2,000 round impression, do that. Is it the greatest optic ever? I think that's pretty subjective. I feel like it's an optic that I'd be perfectly comfortable using. There's nothing wrong with it. It's got a decent dot size. It's got really good clarity. It's got decent battery life, at least from what's quoted. Good construction materials and well-placed and purposeful design in the manipulations being windage elevation and my brightness adjustments. Clarity's good, no distortion that I can tell, and very minimal notch filter for those people who are worried about that bluish tint. It is there, but you can hardly notice it and only notice it in certain lighting conditions with certain backdrops. It's a precise optic, and that's what we want. Because it kind of defaults to an acro footprint, even though it does come with an adapter plate for the doctor footprint, what that means is if you don't have an acro footprint firearm, you can just get an adapter plate from the secondary market, because they're definitely going to make them. Or if you have a doctor footprint, you're one of those 8 people, then you clearly aren't going to have any problems mounting this thing if that's something you want to do. Personally, that's tolerance stacking to me. I want to use as few adapter plates as possible. But most people who are mounting a optic on a firearm these days are going to have to use a plate, so it's not a big deal. If you have doctor footprint, great. If you don't, get something that has an acro footprint and you'll be good to go, or you can have your gun direct milled for it, that's fine too. Options are good, and this is now, at least initially, like I said, that's my caveat, my first 2,000 rounds into it. I'm going to keep shooting it until, I hit 20,000 rounds or it dies, whichever happens first. This is another option for people who want options, and it just shows that we're continually driving the train forward with what we as consumers, customers need and want in our optic features, and Steiner was definitely paying attention. You don't have to be first, you just want to be best, and I think that this is an excellent attempt, or I should say an excellent serious attempt at a duty carry optic from Steiner, and I feel like these are going to be very popular because it seems to have all the right purpose-built features, and that's exactly what we want. I'm Eric Cowan with Stage Dynamics. Train accordingly.